I met up with this girl who looked minimally like her pictures. I wasn't interested in her, but didn't want to blow her off, so I agreed to a nice walk in the park. After multiple red flags, I knew it was time to end the date. We were in my neighborhood, so I casually steered our walk to the nearest subway, made a half-assed excuse, and bid her goodbye. She took a couple of steps down the stairs, and then fully turned around, closed her eyes, puckered her lips, and leaned in. She was a few inches taller than me, so we were about eye level. I panicked and leaned back. Her eyes were still closed, and she kept leaning in. She leaned in a bit too much and lost her balance. She tried to regain her footing, but it didn't work. She slipped, fell, and rolled down the subway stairs. If I were a good person, I would have run down to help her up. If I were even a medium person, I would have shouted from the top of the stairs, "Are you okay?" But no, I'm a bad person, and I booked it back to my apartment as soon as I could. I got a text from her about an hour later. In case you were wondering, I'm fine. My dad, in his late 70s, has been on Plenty of Fish for years. He has his profile set up to only accept messages from women 60 plus, a standard feature of theirs. One day, he's contacted by a profile claiming to be around 80, but with a suspiciously young-looking and heavily filtered headshot. She initiated a chat with him. I later acquired screenshots to prove this. He immediately asked her about the picture mismatch, and she told him, "Oh yeah, I'm actually 23, but my friend created this account for me with a wrong birth date, and it won't let me change it now." My dad told her he wasn't necessarily interested in seeing a 23-year-old, but would be willing to chat. During the conversation, she worked in that she was on hard times after having moved several states to escape an abusive ex, blah blah, and her car was currently out of commission, so she could really use a ride to the cell phone store to sort out something on her account. He told her, although he lives over an hour away, he's occasionally in the neighborhood for a call, and would be happy to if and when. About a week later, he got a call in that area, so he messaged her. The slippery sloping intensified from here. To preface, I'm most frustrated that he was so oblivious to the scam. She hopped in his car and told him he'd be taking her to the mall. Well, okay. Once there, she proceeded to hotfoot into Victoria's Secret. She grabbed a clothes shopping bag and overflowed it with expensive items. Then she went to check out $500 of merch and realized she had forgotten her wallet at home, which of course had her cash in it. Somehow, she conned my dad into opening a Victoria's charge account in his name, with promises of paying him back in cash once he dropped her back home. This apparently didn't raise any red flags to the clerks attending to this transaction. They drove back to her house and she headed inside saying she'll be right back with the money. After half an hour, he got out of his truck and knocked on her door, and she answered crossly saying, "What are you still doing here?" He went away, but a few days later, he was back in the area and knocked on her door again. This time, he told her he would need the cash or the merchandise back, or he would be calling the cops. Right at this moment, there were some neighbors arriving home right across the street, so she yelled at the top of her lungs for him to get his hands off her, pushed him backwards onto her steps, breaking a rib, yelling for them to call the cops and disappearing in her house. He waited the 15 or 20 minutes it took for a cop car, accompanied by a paramedic unit, to respond, believing he would be able to tell the cops what actually happened and clear things up. When she re-emerged from her house, somehow she now had small scratches on her neck, and she told the cops that this 200-pound man had, quote, thrown her to the ground and strangled her when she refused to give back gifts he had bought her on a first date. Despite her claims of assault, the paramedics left the scene without so much as personally examining her. and the cops arrested my dad, already having decided that he was guilty, and on the way to the police station, apparently alerted every news outlet in the county. I found out a few days later when my sister-in-law, who lives halfway across the country from me, saw his mugshot on Yahoo News, randomly under a headline along the lines of 70-plus-year-old arrested for strangling 23-year-old after first date. I worked with him to acquire screenshots of the remnants of their conversations on Plenty of Fish, after she had deleted her account, as well as a Google cache of her profile that she'd attempted to delete, and provided them to a highly rated criminal defense lawyer in that jurisdiction. All of the evidence I've been able to piece together supports his version of events more or less. The prosecution decided not to proceed with their case against him, as the victim told them that she would not appear in court to testify against him unless they paid her. That's right. About 6 months later, we stumbled on a new Plenty of Fish profile with her same profile picture, a different username, and a different but similarly wrong age, as well as similar sugar daddy baiting profile language, claiming to be in another city about 50 miles away. I assume she moves up and down the East Coast squatting at houses of acquaintances, pulling the same scam on a long string of gullible men, but didn't count on one of them actually calling her on her scam. My dad has his faults for sure, but he is the type of person who would go out of his way to give a ride to a complete stranger just because they were hard up. I sorely regret that this bit him on the arse so hard. This was about 4 years ago. I matched with a cute guy, a bit older than me. I was 23 and he was 31. We talked for a few days and exchanged numbers and decided to meet for dinner. He chose a place about 45 minutes from where I lived, but insisted the food was great. So I accepted and drove out to meet him. First red flag was the fact that he showed up nearly an hour late, reeking of weed, without so much as an apology, but instead a half-assed excuse about needing to pick something up from his friend's house. Next, he heavily criticized what I ordered, which was tacos, and a few minutes into the meal, he explained that he was really looking for a girlfriend because he needed someone to watch his 3 children for free so he could have more time to ride his motorcycle. Of course, the icing on the cake was the absolute temper tantrum he had when I offered to split the bill, since I knew there would definitely not be a second date, and accusing me of trying to humiliate him in public. A real winner. So I had been dating this guy for the past 2 months. Let's call him Chad. Chad, who was 34, and I, a 29-year-old female, actually met 5 years ago. We attempted to date each other twice before, once for a few months in 2016 when we first met, and a year later for a few months in 2017. It didn't work out due to his controlling and borderline abusive and narcissistic behaviors. I know. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. However, things cooled down and we were able to maintain a very sporadic, friendly contact through text throughout the years. Anyway, Chad reappeared again in my life early March this year after moving back to New York from Florida. I had just moved out to my new apartment when we reconnected, and he love-bombed the hell out of me. I really thought for a moment that he was a changed and more mature man. He gave me tons of gifts and helped me a lot with my apartment renovation process. Other things I liked about him: he was tall and handsome and fit. We enjoyed going to the gym together. We had lots of thoughtful discussions and things in common. Decent sex. We enjoyed the same type of documentaries. He knew about gardening, home improvements, and was a great handyman. He was also a great cook and bought me groceries and cooked for me. Things I didn't like: he would subtly insult me all the time. He wasn't great at communication or conflict resolution. He had a massive ego and was unable to see things from another perspective. He would constantly complain, whine and criticize his family and friends about how they did him wrong in some way, or criticize the world in general non-stop. He had no humility or introspective thinking whatsoever and never apologized. He had a very dark, negative vibe most of the time, and he would talk about all his dreams and visions, but never had any concrete, realistic plans to achieve them. Also, he's on unemployment and has no plans to look for a job. He'd drink a lot, sometimes do hard drugs, get into bar fights. He'd call me names like psycho, then say he was just kidding. Anyway, I gave my best efforts and tried to overlook some of these things, because when the relationship was good, it was very good. In retrospect, I should have seen what I'm about to tell you coming. A few days ago, I offered Chad a free eye exam and a free pair of nice designer eyeglasses after I noticed him squinting while watching the TV. I've been managing an optometrist's office for the past 5 years and receive a yearly credit for new frame and lenses. I told him he could gladly use my credit for this year, no problem. He accepted and I arranged an appointment for him. My intention was not only to give him this gift, but also for him to see my workplace and meet my 2 colleagues, Steve the optician and Samantha the frame stylist, who I'm extremely close with on a personal level. Chad shows up at 3 p.m. for his appointment and everything is going smoothly. Everyone welcomes him warmly and it's an overall happy vibe. After his 20-minute exam with the optometrist, my lovely co-workers and I engage in friendly convo and banter with him. Steve and Sam and I like to crack a lot of jokes, so everyone is laughing and having a good time as we pick out and have him try on a bunch of glasses. Chad is making little jokes too, everyone's getting along and I'm excited. Chad finally picks a nice pair of frames out and I bring them to the counter as we begin to discuss his lens options. We pick a premium brand of light-blocking lenses. I finish writing his order up and I jokingly say to Chad, "Okay, that'll be $1,000. Samantha and I laugh. Then I say, "Just kidding, it's free, but you can pay me back in rides." Chad picks me up from work sometimes and was planning to pick me up from work that night. When everything's done, he heads out and my amazing and super kind co-worker Steve even gives him a warm hug and high-fives goodbye. I walk Chad to the door and we kiss and hug outside. I say, "That was fun," and he agrees. He goes back to his car and I go back inside the store smiling. Steve and my other co-worker Samantha tease me and ask me when me and Chad are getting married and having kids. I text Chad a cute message with a smiley heart emoji and we arrange a time for him to pick me up. He asks me what kind of dinner I want and that he pick it up for us. All is seemingly well until 6:15 p.m. and he pulls up to the store in his car. I hop into the car and the vibe has dramatically changed. He's in an aggressive mood, not smiling at all, being very short and angry. So of course I ask, "What's wrong? Is everything okay?" Turns out Chad had been working himself up with paranoid delusions for the past 3 hours because he then states, "I don't appreciate how disrespectful you were to me in front of your co-workers." I'm dumbfounded and taken aback as I ask him to elaborate. He then proceeds to go off on a tirade. "What, you really think I can't pay for glasses on my own? You think you're better than me? Why are you trying to hold a pair of glasses over my head? You think I really owe you something because you got me a free pair of glasses?" I say, "No, of course you don't owe me anything. That's just how we joke around." He doesn't accept this answer and keeps going off on how disrespectful I am and how I humiliated him. At this point, I'm actually frightened by his behavior and I go into fight or flight mode. At the red light, I say, "I'm actually feeling pretty tired, I'll talk to you later." I grab my stuff and get out of the car in shock. As I'm walking away, he yells, "You're gonna walk out of my car? Don't ever hit me up again. Have a nice life." I don't even turn my head. He speeds off and I go home. I get to my apartment 30 minutes later when I receive some texts from him which read, "You don't have to respond. I just want you to know specifically how I feel disrespected. was when you told me a price and that I could pay you back with rides. I don't want to feel like I owe you something or belittled by you doing something you wanted to do for me. We stand beside each other. I don't stand above you and you don't stand above me. Why would you even mention a price when you told me you got me and then say I have to pay you back with rides in front of your co-worker who I'm meeting for the first time? That's not a question you need to answer to me. Maybe for yourself though. I respond back. I have to say I'm absolutely shocked and overwhelmingly hurt by your interpretation of events. To think of my friends and I in such a negative light after being nothing but welcoming and loving to you, and offering you a gift with nothing expected in return, just displays deep insecurity and extreme paranoia to me. We are all loving and kind people who joke around. No one thought less of you, nothing was expected to return the favor, and no one wanted to make you feel bad, just the opposite. To have this warped and negative perspective is extremely concerning to me. I need someone who's on a similar positive and joking, silly type wavelength, and this event is an absolute deal breaker which proves this isn't going to work. There won't be any classes or any more rides or anything to do with the two of us. I wish you well, Chad, as I always have. He responds with, I'm not saying that's what you literally expected. It was the fact that you literally mentioned the cost and that it could be repaid with rides. The mention of any money when you're doing someone a favor is rude as hell and embarrassing. At this point, I'm frustrated and exhausted at having to keep explaining over and over that it was a joke and that no harm was meant, and I respond, it was a JOKE. Take care, Chad. I'm not interested in going back and forth. He then blocks me, and I'm like, good riddance. In conclusion, I'm really glad it's over. I saw a lot of other red flags throughout this experience, but this was the final nail in the coffin. If he thought it was a tasteless joke and approached me in a normal way about it, I would have apologized and made sure to avoid jokes like that in the future. But he didn't. He berated me angrily, didn't listen to me, and threw a tantrum. I know my intentions were pure and good, and I will not put up with or bend to the insecurities and delusions of abusive and negative people like this. Lesson learned: if it didn't work out the first or second time, it probably won't work out the third time. Let this story be a lesson to get someone's Snapchat before meeting up. I showed up for a coffee date after talking with a woman on Tinder for a few days. She seemed cute and eager to meet up. I got there 15 minutes early. I like to get my coffee and settle my first date nerves before the other person shows. I ordered my coffee and sat down. A woman and two children I didn't recognize approached my table. Are you such and such? I said, yes. Do I know you? She said, I'm Becky. We've been talking on Tinder. Sorry that my kids are here. I couldn't find a sitter. This is the point that I should have gotten up and left. I was younger, 18 at the time, and didn't have the confidence to end the date early. I then slogged through the most awkward and uncomfortable date of my life. First of all, she was 12 years older than her profile claimed. She was actually 33. Secondly, she had gained around 100 pounds and 8 years of stress since the pictures that were on her profile. Her children didn't know how to behave in public at all. They were animalistic. They jumped up on the storefront glass window frame. They were constantly harassing other patrons. The only reason the date ended when it did was because they broke 2 of the board games the coffee shop had for people to use. All of this took place in about 45 minutes. We got kicked out about half an hour after the date was supposed to start. In that time, she found time to pester me about how much I make in a year, pushed her views that a man should provide for his woman, asked if I was ready to be a stepdad, and denounced post-secondary education, telling me to get a job with her brother's labor union. The date concluded with her inviting me to move into her studio apartment where she lived with her kids and her unemployed baby daddy. I tried to ghost her, but she continued to stalk and harass me online on any social media where I had my face as my profile picture. Whenever I tell this story among friends, I refer to her as Queen Red Flag. I used to live in England. I'm a Canadian woman. Whilst living in England, I used to get all of the stereotypical comments made on my nationality. Oh, you drink maple syrup from the bottle, eh? You live in igloos in Canada? You go oot in a boot? Well, one day, while in line at the local pub, these two twats decide to go ham on my accent. I could feel their breath and spit on the back of my neck. They started getting annoyed at me for ignoring them, and started getting more and more aggressive. I turned around and said, "You two both seem to have lost the plot. How about you maggots piss off and enjoy your night?" They did not appreciate this and started absolutely losing their ever-loving minds. I ignored them because jeebus, I just wanted a drink. Then, this incredibly handsome man comes down the stairs. There were stairs pretty close to the bar that led to the toilets. He was roughly 6'4", fair-haired, very well put together, strong jaw, broad shoulders, green eyes, so handsome, took me back when I saw him. Next thing I knew, each of his hands were on the shoulders of those twats. He told them to leave me alone and to apologize to me. They did, and he then apologized for their actions and bought me a drink. It was a lovely moment, and I got a free drink. I take my drink and I mosey on down to the couch where my friends were sitting, and I joined them. I informed them about my debacle and told them about my hot knight in shining armor. Just then, one of my friends interrupts me and says, "Was it that guy?" I look up and there he is, in all his hotness, strutting over me. I'm seated, remember? So once he gets in front of me, he gets down on one knee to meet my gaze. He takes my hand in his and gently pulls me in so I could hear him over the loud music. He properly introduces himself. His name is Aaron, and expresses apologies again for those men's actions, and would like to show me how true British men behave. He'd like to take me on a date that next weekend. Well, hot damn. I agreed and gave him my number. We spent the week leading up to our date texting and getting to know each other. We go on our first date. He's lovely, great conversation, lots of laughs. We have a small kiss in front of the cab. He opens my door, and that's that. Second date, he has flowers for me. He takes me to a play. Is this guy the one? Holy crap, he's so lovely. Third date, dinner at a very nice restaurant. The third date started normally. We're talking and laughing about each other's day. Then he says, "Well, it's our third date, and you know what that means." No, I do not. Is there some strange British third date ritual that I wasn't aware of? You know, we're about to become intimate. My face just goes completely hot. What the actual hell? Is this a British ritual? I am so confused. How does a third date automatically mean this? Maybe I'm naive. I've only had 2 relationships before this dude, and only had sex with 1 man before. I asked, "Is that what that means, huh?" I knew I wouldn't be sleeping with him, but I was curious about what he was about to say, because it was clear he had a story to tell. He continues, "Yep, and I have something I need to tell you first." Here it is. He's going to tell me he has herpes or some other sexual transmitted infection. Oh, but I wish that were the case. Aaron said, "Before we become intimate, you need to know I have a set of rules. You are mine now, so therefore you will refer to me as master from now on. You must consult me before every outfit you wear and every meal you eat. You will need my approval beforehand. I will use and abuse you. Don't worry, you'll like it. I will record us sleeping together, but because of your job, we can put a bag over your head so no one will know it's you. No more nights out drinking with your friends. You'll be spending your evenings with me. You'll be expected to be at my flat every second day at 7 p.m. I need all the passwords to all of your logins. No more male friends. I don't care if they're gay. That's over with. Finally, once you're comfortable, and only when you're comfortable, I want you to eat my ass." I stared in utter horror. I was waiting for the, "Ha, gotcha, just kidding, look at your face." But that moment didn't come. We both sat there in silence. I could see the hair sticking out from the top of his dress shirt. I shook the image of his hairy butt out of my head. Without a word, I wiped my mouth with a napkin. I pushed my plate away from me, grabbed my purse and coat, walked out, grabbed a cab that just happened to drop someone off. I stepped in and went home. I blocked his number and never spoke to him again. I matched with this girl on Tinder, and we spoke for about a week or so, but nothing happened. Fast forward about 2 weeks after that, I finish my shift at 11 p.m, and she asks if we can hang out and have some drinks, so I invite her to a bar next to my house. And when she gets in, she looks nothing like her photos. She proceeds to tell me that she uses her friends' photos because if she used her own, then no one would match with her. I play it out nicely, have a drink with her, and then tell her I work in the morning and I need to leave. So I turn the corner and unlock my door to get into the condo building, and I hold it for my neighbor. As I walk up the stairs and go to unlock my door, I realize that she's there behind me. She managed to catch the door before it closed when I held it open for the guy behind me. I tell her that she's not coming in, and she throws a tantrum in the hallway. A bunch of doors opened up, and I see my neighbors looking at this girl throwing a fit on the ground because I wouldn't let her into my condo. I had to call security, and the cops showed up. She was escorted out. I deleted Tinder and never went on it again. For this guy, we'll call him Mike. I met Mike on the dating site Meet Me and started talking to him. We confirmed up a date, and he warned me that he was a little chubby. He looked a little chubby in his photos, and I'm not discriminatory against heavier people, but I will not date someone over 250 pounds. I just have preferences. Plus, at the time, I was 102 pounds and 5 feet, so was worried about being crushed if I ever did something with a larger guy. He told me he was 250 pounds, and we agreed to meet at a local McDonald's to make sure each other were not a serial killer and who we stated to be. This is where things go wrong. First of all, I greet him, and he's not 250 pounds, but 400. Now, I understand that sometimes people are self-conscious of their weight, so I brushed it off as that. Due to the fact that he lied to me about this, he would suit me better as a friend than a boyfriend. He would have had a better shot if he'd just been honest in the first place. Well, not only that, but you could hear him breathe as he walked. It sounded like every breath hurt, and walking made it hurt worse. No, he did not have asthma or COPD. Nevertheless, I promised a date, and I'm true to my word. I asked him where he would want to go, and he simply said McDonald's, as he's nervous in fancy settings, which in terms I understand social anxiety, and reluctantly agreed. So we both ordered McDonald's and sat down to eat. We get to talking, which is good, and then he asks if I'll be his girlfriend, which I tell him I usually only make things official after a couple of dates, and that I would like to get to know him first, etc. He then unloads on me while starting to wail, like a crying whale, about how he's 23 and never been laid, and that he's never had a real girlfriend, and that we seem so perfect, and if he isn't laid by 30, he'll kill himself, and he's so alone. With this went any prospect of friendship, and while he was sobbing, I blocked him on the dating app. I just didn't know how to react at the time. He then proceeds to get on his knees and beg for sex. Yeah, in a public place, offering to pay me and all this. At this time, I was 18 and just got out of a relationship with a cheating ex and stepping into the waters again, so I was still a nice little lenient girl. I actually offered him tips, told him that I don't think that this is going to work out, then went home. As I was getting into my car, he chases me out and says that it will be my fault if he dies that night. I left and didn't hear from him again. Fast forward a few months, I'm with my ex-fiancé. We were dating at that time, and it was serious by now. Guess who I finally hear from on Facebook? Mike. Mike seems calmer, and like I said, I was still stupidly young and naive and nice. I engage in conversation, asking how he's been. I tell him I'm in a relationship. He says okay, but he's still struggling and asks for tips. I give him tips and we have a general conversation. He still keeps talking about how bad he yearns for sex and how down on his luck he is. I tell him if he wants it that bad, go hire someone. Anyway, I try to help him, even set him up with a couple of friends who were slightly interested, who he does what he did to me during our date, and then proceeds to annoy all the ladies on my friends list, saying that I was setting them up to be with him, etc. I get a lot of messages from people I hadn't heard from since high school, asking why I was setting them up with this creep, saying I'm married or dating. You get the gist. I tell them I didn't and confront him, and oh how he denies anything. He eventually gives up harassing the girls on my Facebook and lying to me, and begs me over Messenger to please have sex with him. He just sits there begging, offering to pay, and then messages my ex-fiancé and begs him too. Of course, my ex-fiancé had questions, and I answered them honestly. We both agree to block Mike. We do, and that's the end of it, or so we think. Fast forward 1 month later, I still had a Snapchat at this time, but wasn't active much on it, and seriously contemplating deleting the app. He messages me again, and I try to nicely tell him that I don't want anything to do with him. He proceeds to sob loudly and beg me why over the phone on Snapchat. By now I'd had enough, and I realized that being nice was not going to shake him off my leg. So, sad to say, I had one of my least proudest moments and told him that I didn't want him around me because he's a clingy loser, then proceeded to tell him that I only spoke to him for a psychology class experiment. That made him go away for a year, but we'll get to that in a second. My first cousin told me that he went to school with Mike. Mike has been like this since high school. He never had much luck with the ladies due to his weight, so reverted to nagging. He had this issue with his now fiancée, as Mike fancied her. He would beg and plead and beg, and then when she was with my first cousin, he would beg and plead him too. They literally had to get the principal and counselor involved to get him gone, and he still messages her to this day under new profiles. Not fake, but new. So, after a year, I forget about Mike and get a new phone. Well, lo and behold, I did not label his number, as I only label numbers of people important to me. So anyways, I ask people who they are, as I didn't realize that I could transfer all this information, and wrote down everything manually and avoided this. I wind up at Mike's number. I had forgotten all about it, and planned on deleting it, but never got around to it. I ask who it is, yada yada. It's him, but he goes by his first name, and I know a lot of people with his first name, and thinking it's one of them, and go with it. The more we spoke, the more I realized it was him, and I asked if it was him, and that did he know it was me. He said yes, and that he wanted another chance. I told him that I was engaged, and he said he would pay for sex, to please have sex with him, and to let my ex-fiancé unblock him so he could have permission. I promptly blocked and deleted the number. never again. And to this day, he makes new Facebook accounts and approaches me and my ex on them, asking for sex. I delete those too. I matched with a girl and sent a lot of messages. Later that night, we talked on the phone and the conversation was going really well. So I asked to go out the next night. She agrees. Then 5 minutes later, she tells me that she needs to tell me something. She tells me that she's permanently in a wheelchair. So either I'm an a-hole if I back out now, or an a-hole if I lead her on. I figure why not? It's just a date and could be a fun time still. We talk more that night and go to bed. The next morning she calls me early and tells me she's been doing something crazy. She won't tell me what, but she said she'll show me later. A few hours go by and she calls me back and tells me that she's going to send me a pic of what she did. I check my messages and I see a picture of her wrist with my name now tattooed on it. We end the call and I immediately tell my friends about this crazy girl. Later that night, I'm driving to her place because I figure if she can be committed enough to tattoo my name on her, I should be committed enough to go on this date. Plus, I have to know it's real. I'm almost at her place, and I realize that my car may not accommodate her wheelchair, and I know she drives, so I ask if she can drive us. I'm walking in the parking lot, and she arrives, and I get in the car. Now, I had figured that she had a handicapped-enabled car. Nope. Turns out she just uses crutches to drive. One on the gas, and one on the brake. I don't like this as we're driving on the Southern California freeway in traffic. We go to eat, and she gets a phone call from her daughter. Turns out she left her 10-year-old daughter at home, alone, and she's scared. I'm like, hey, we can go. But she's like, no, it's okay. I gave her something to make her sleep. She'll be asleep soon. So, we finish up, and I was going to take her to see a movie, but the kid thing was too much, so we need to head home. And my fingers are already crossed that we make it, when she turns to me while driving and says, wow, I'm kind of drunk. In my head, I'm like, 1 drink is all you had. But I ask if I can drive, and she says no, she's going to get in the fast lane, and uses her crutch to hit the gas. I say my last prayers, but we made it back to her place. So I wheeled her back into her door, said goodbye, and lived. Tattoo was real though. This only happened less than a week ago, but the foundations were laid about a month prior. I'm a 34-year-old male, and I match with a 32-year-old woman, let's call her Jane, on a popular bee-themed dating app. Jane messaged me at around 2 AM, and we got talking. We had a lot of similar interests, and conversation was flowing nicely. I was on the night shift, and she was welcome company. She lived not far from where I was working, and suggested we meet up for a coffee when I finished work. I quite liked the spontaneity of the offer, so I accepted. We never had that coffee, as when we met, she suggested a walk on the beach, 15 minutes drive from where we met. She hopped in my car, incredibly trusting of her I thought, and off we went to a beautiful beach. We chatted for an hour or two, before I started to fade from the previous night's work. I called time on the date, dropped her home. Kiss on the cheek, let's do this again, etc. All is well, warm and fuzzy feelings all round. For various reasons, it took a few weeks to arrange a second date, but we eventually got there. We lived a decent distance from each other, about 34 miles, so it was a toss-up between her traveling to me or vice versa. We decided that I would travel to her, as I was the only one who drove, and planned our date. I booked an Airbnb, so there were no assumptions, and we decided to meet early evening, walk our respective dogs by the sea, drinks in a lovely little pub, dinner in a beautiful seaside restaurant, and possibly drinks after if all went well. So far, so romantic. Cue the descent into madness. First bad sign was when I rang her to ask her if she'd like me to pick up drinks on my way down. Now, I like a drink. I'm Irish. It's in my DNA. But this order staggered me. 8 500ml cans of cider, a bottle of Pinot Grigio, and a bottle of rosé. You could drown a small child in the amount of alcohol in her request. Being the good date that I wanted to be, I obliged and set away on the hour drive to her place. As I approached her hometown, I decided to check my Airbnb booking. Said booking had disappeared into the ether, as has the room I booked. Being a serial procrastinator and not wanting to be late, I decided to sort it out later. And actually, luckily enough, she offered her spare room to me. So I arrived at her door and I'm greeted with a big hug. Such a lovely greeting. Except I begin to notice that she's slurring her words a bit. She tells me she didn't really sleep the night before and has had a bottle of wine already. For context, it's around 5 p.m. She explains that she was also pretty nervous about the date. My stupid, self-conscious brain is utterly flattered at the thought that someone would be nervous about a date with me, so I breeze past it and take it as a compliment. And to her credit, she drinks slowly as we chat in her garden. The dogs are gleefully playing in her back garden as we sip our drinks and chat on a beautiful sunny evening near the eastern Irish coast. Despite the eccentricities, it's shaping up to be a lovely evening. Time gets away from us and we decide we don't have time to walk the dogs, so we head to the pub for a pre-dinner drink. Idyllic, huh? Well, strap in, as it's about to get weird. We arrive at a beautiful pub, grab a seat outside and order drinks. Immediately, she turns to the left. There's a couple sitting beside us, with a beautiful boxer cross beside them. She adopts this dog. She asks if she can hold the dog's lead, and ends up minding the dog for roughly an hour that we're there, and all the while, talking to this couple while they're eating their dinner. I'm sure they were happy to have a dog sitter. I sat there and tried to enjoy an admittedly incredible pint of Guinness. The time comes to head to the restaurant, and off we go. Picture the scene. Outdoor seating, sun slowly setting, 5 steps away from falling into the harbour. Absolutely idyllic. The food is incredible. Succulent monkfish, flaky cod. Everything is perfect. Well, Jane likes making friends. She best friends a couple at the table next to us. Lovely couple in their late 60s. Conversation is flowing. Jane excuses herself to go to the bathroom. The female half of the couple leans in and grabs my hand. You seem like a lovely man. Please, please, please be careful with this girl. Please. This is my oh crap moment. I decide to stop drinking. I have half a glass of wine left and I nurse it for the rest of the meal. We get our doggy bag, I pay, and off we go into the night. As we leave, the aforementioned female half of the couple gives me a worried look and squeezes my hand, with what I now know was concern as goodbyes are said. A post-dinner drink is suggested by Jane, and as this is not my home turf, I follow her lead. I'm led into the dingiest, dirtiest, locals-only pub I've ever been in. I'm pretty sure I heard a record scratch as all heads turned to look at the outsider entering their hallowed space. We make our way outside of the back of the pub to the smoking area. I get the drinks in, and she disappears. I find her talking to a group of 5 guys. Okay, maybe they're friends she hasn't seen in a while. Nope. Strangers. Thankfully, one of them calls me over to join. Turns out they're great fun, and I click with 2 of the guys, Jonathan and Stephen, sitting to my left, as Jane wanders back and forth between the 2 to my right and 1 opposite me. Chats are being had, and while unconventional for a date, I'm having a good time. Eventually, nature calls, and off I go to the mold infestation with a urinal in it. On my return, the mood has changed. Jonathan has a face like a bulldog who's accidentally drank piss. I ask if he's okay. He says, "You need to have a word with her, man. She just slapped me in the face." I'm incredulous. I asked what happened. He can't tell me what instigated it. All he knows is she leaned across the table and landed 5 of her best across his cheek. I go into damage control mode. Jane is happily, obliviously chatting away to the other guys, so I focus my attention on Jonathan. I calm him down eventually, and things are okay again. Mercifully, last orders are called. We make our way towards the exit, but my annoyingly small bladder decides to lure me towards the cesspit with a cistern again. Off I trot, finish my business, and come back to an empty space where Jane used to be. I wander into the bar area to find Jane, arm draped and ass planted on one of the elderly patrons of the bar. I gently interrupt this rendezvous, and we make our way to the exit. Except, Jane decides that the Herculean amount of alcohol in her house isn't enough, so she holds back to order 8 cans of beer. For takeaway, a practice that is normally reserved for only the dodgiest pubs in Ireland, and it's technically illegal. Cans in hand, we begin our merry march homeward. We get to what I realize is halfway to her house. I'm not familiar with this town in the slightest. It's my 3rd time here, and it's now 1 AM, when Jane decides she'd like a nice sit down on the street. She invites me to join her, and I decline. Her persuasion method is shouting, "Sit the hell down, you asshole." I'm shocked and do my best to defuse the situation. She eventually accepts my hand to help her up, and rewards my chivalry by slapping me in the face twice. I'm completely taken aback by this, but I'm acutely aware of how far away from home I am, and I'm hoping to now get to hers, sleep in the spare room, and leave the next morning. Onwards we march until she needs another sit down, presumably with the intention of making it to base camp in the morning. She resumes her refrain of calling me an asshole for not sitting down on the cold ground, and at this point, I give up. Off I go, leaving her there. I decide to sleep in my car and drive home as soon as I wake. I get back to my car with cans and leftovers in hand, roll back the passenger seat, and hunker down for the night. As soon as I get comfortable, a horrifying thought intrudes. My dog is in her house. I decide to sleep and try to retrieve my dog in the morning. He's indoors and warm, and, I assume, safe. Off I go into the land of Nod, until I'm awoken by the window of my car being slapped hard. Guess who? She angrily insists I come inside, and I see this as a chance to rescue my dog. In I go, and then a horrifying realization dawns on me. My dog likes going upstairs. My dog also has cataracts. My dog is afraid of walking downstairs after multiple falls. 3 guesses where my dog is in Jane's house. I follow Jane upstairs, all the while trying to plan my exit strategy. As soon as my foot touches the top step, Jane gets aggressive. She wants to sleep with me, and her flirting strategy is that of a prehistoric cave woman. That's mine, me want now. She aggressively pulls me towards her bedroom, all the while grabbing and clawing at my gentleman area. My protests and refusals fall on deaf ears. Somehow I manage to play it cool. I tell her that I should bring my dog downstairs so we don't get disturbed. She agrees and goes into her room. I grab my dog, sprint downstairs, grab the bag I brought, plus the booze I brought for myself, and bolted to my car and got the hell out of Dodge. Luckily, my close friend, and this was his request to be called this, Colt Youngblood, was awake. He kept me company and awake for the hour-ish drive home. Unfortunately, his husband, who was requested to be called Sloane Bravestar, was also awoken by this tale, but thankfully, after hearing the full details, was very understanding. Oh, and apparently she doesn't remember the whole physical sexual assault part of the evening. She texted me the next day asking, "Are you okay? Kiss, kiss, kiss." I informed her of the previous night's proceedings. She tried to turn it back on me because I, quote, have a life and a daughter and don't have time to get to know the real her. Yeah. And what prompted the nice old lady to warn me? Well, it was nothing she said per se. I was able to piece together that they had an interaction on the beach sometime previously, and by interaction, I think it was a booze-fueled public meltdown kind of encounter. So that's my tale. Hope you enjoyed it. I certainly didn't. I used to work in a gym, so I'd get hit on by random gym dudes a lot. One day, this canine cop comes in, and he told me they were going to do a drill for the dog. So they hid the dog sniff toy or whatever somewhere in the gym, and the cop and the dog went off to work. Afterwards, the cop asked me if I could get some water for the dog, and I did. And while the dog drank, we started talking. He asked me out, and I said yes, and I was actually pretty excited. We go out to dinner and a movie, and afterwards, he asks me if I wanted to get a drink at his place. At this point, I'm feeling weird. He had stopped talking and kind of started getting agitated. My gut tells me to let someone know where I am, so I pull out my phone and quickly text a friend of mine who lives close by. We go in, and his place is practically empty. There's a bed and a couch, both facing a TV. I'm not drinking my drink and just trying to make small talk to break the awkward silence. I'm leaning against the kitchen counter because it's so close to the front door, and he starts coming closer to me. Not really saying anything, barely answering my questions, and eventually cornering me against the counter. I start getting a sick feeling in my stomach because he just has this weird, blank expression on his face. I turn away from him, and he trails behind me, still really close. I put my hand in my pocket and try to open my messages in my phone to text my friend. I send him a bunch of gibberish text, and he calls me to make sure I'm okay. I use this as an excuse to leave and book it the hell out of there. I don't know what would have happened if I would have stayed, and I don't really like to think about it. So, starting down this road of polyamory has been a fun time, but I've made some stupid mistakes. One of those mistakes is, I went on a date with a super cute girl and ignored all the red flags. In my defense, a lot of the bad stuff happened towards the end of the date, but still, the red flags were there. I just gave this girl more credit than she deserved. So this girl comes into my work a few times, and she's super cute. So I'm like, damn, I'll ask for her number. To my surprise, she gives it to me. I'm super stoked. My day off comes up, and I call her. I'm like, hey, do you want to go out for dinner or something? And she's like, heck yeah, I want to go to the casino. And I'm like, sure. Seems odd, but she's super cute. I'm down. Red flag number 1. Because I don't drive, she has to pick me up. I have her pick me up at a restaurant pretty close to my house. She tells me that she's 5 minutes away and she'll be there soon. I get there, and 45 minutes later, she finally gets there. I was about done. Then I saw her and was like, okay, I'll keep this going. Before we head out, she needs to go help her mum with her car. I'm like, no problem. We go and we help her. Then on the way to the casino, we start chatting and she's really cool. We talk about Rooster by Alice in Chains and more music. She tells me that she's an ex-addict, and while she relapsed a few months ago, she really wanted to stay clean to get her life together. This could also be seen as a foreboding red flag, but I gave her the benefit of believing her. She needs gas in her car, but apparently has no money. Another red flag. But I'm like, whatever, here's a 20. Then we're off to the casino. She's gambling and I'm just sitting with her. Then her phone rings. This isn't the first time, but it is the same caller ID each time. She claims it's her ex-boyfriend who's in prison and that he's obsessed with her. But when she answers immediately, she's lying to him and it's clear they aren't over. She quote goes to get a drink mid-call when it's clear he was getting upset she was with a dude. Again, red flag. Anyway, she keeps gambling with my money and I give her like a total of $40. Then her mum shows up in the middle, where I am asked to give her mum some money, which I just hand her $5. This girl ditches me multiple times, leaving me with her mother at a certain point. So we're finally going to leave and get lunch, but she tells me to, quote, go over there, so she could talk to this sketchy chick and these two guys with her. At this point, I'm well beyond pissed off, but she's my ride, and I'm just trying to stay calm. So suddenly, she leaves the building with them, telling me that she'll be right back. I'm like, whatever. When she comes back, she finds me. Then we find her mum, just so my date can look at me and go, hey, I'm trying to be straight with you, but my mum and I are going to my car to shoot up. You can be there or don't. I don't care. It's going to happen. Apparently, she just bought it from those sketchy people. So I'm like, well, crap. I tell her basically like, I'll give you all the money in my pocket right now, and I'll pay you in full for what you bought. Just give it to me, and I'll get rid of it. No one will know. She then gets upset saying I'm being too much and whatnot. She tells this to some dude that's there, and he can't be older than 21. Like, legit, he looks barely out of high school, besides his tattoos. This dumbass comes up to me and starts running his mouth because that's his, quote, brother's old lady, and he's in prison for armed robbery. You need to leave her alone. She's going to do what she wants, blah, blah, blah. He starts throwing around his little threats, which is making my already pretty triggered PTSD-riddled brain want to go even more berserk than it already did. I try to tell him that it doesn't matter, I'm going home. I already called a ride, and I'm going the hell home. I tell him that I've had many friends do what she's about to do, and they're all dead, and he threatens me again, but ended up finally walking away. I sat down on a nearby bench and waited for my ride. While I'm waiting, who walks by? The girl I'm on a date with. She sees me and is like, oh hey, I'm going to my car with my mum to do something. Then I'll be right back and we can get food. I look at her completely confused like, you already told me what it was you were doing. It's not a secret. I tell her I'm going home and she's like, oh, do you want a ride? I tell her no, trying my best not to mention what she's about to do, so no, I most definitely don't want a ride. Instead, I let her know I called a ride. She said, oh, okay. Text me, okay? Then walks away. Needless to say, I did not. I met this guy on Tinder when I was in college. Talked for about a week before we met up. He seemed normal and we met at a bar for drinks and some appetizers. We had awesome conversations and there were no red flags. I lived about a block from the bar, so we crashed at my place. We were pretty intoxicated, so just went to sleep. I wake up to go to work at 10 AM. It was a Sunday and I was working at Chipotle. He was gone. So I'm like, no biggie. He told me he had to dip out early the next day. I'm getting ready for work and reach into my open drawer for my dresser, and all of my socks and underwear are wet, dripping. So I smelled it, thinking maybe I spilled a drink. It's urine. My whole underwear and sock drawer is full of piss, like 3 inches of it. Every pair of socks and underwear just soaked. At this point, I'm like, no way. What is happening? I'm going to be late for work, so I grab socks from my roommate and head to work. To this day, the only people that believe me are my roommates at the time, and they bring it up. Hey, remember when that Tinder dude flooded your drawer with piss? Dude was no longer in my matches when I checked after work. He must have realized what happened and unmatched me. If you're out there, piss Tinder guy, I forgive you. So first, we'll call this man Waddles. Second, this wasn't my first date with him. It was my second, and to be honest, I really don't know which one was worse. I met Waddles in college about 6 or 7 years ago. We had exchanged numbers, but didn't really keep in contact. He was part of the student IT program, so if my office, student admissions, was having trouble, he was the person that got sent down, so we usually only spoke when that happened. We had a first date, and it sucked, but I was able to lie my way out of it after he asked if I was a closet freak, and he and his friends made bets on whether or not I was kinky. Now, I was 19 and naive, and had just gotten out of a horrible 3.5-year relationship where I was made to feel that sex and my body were the only lovable things about me. So I said yes. I have experience with BDSM, but didn't want to go into any further detail. He started talking about butt stuff, which I quickly changed the subject by telling him I had to work. However, we're not talking about that date. We're talking about the second. I'd like to remind you, I was 19 and naive. So a few months later, I texted him seeing if he maybe wanted a second date. Of course he did. Things had been weird between us for a moment, but we kept civil while at campus, and I figured maybe, just maybe, this one would be better. If you didn't pick this up by now, I was really bad at noticing red flags, or this never would have happened. But it did. The plan was that we'd go and see a movie together. Awesome. I like movies, and it would keep him from being gross again and asking too much detail. Waddles picked me up at my grandparents' house, and even 10 minutes in the drive, I wanted to bail. I'm the daughter of a sailor, and the daughter of an alcoholic. I grew up with a lot of cursing, and I like to pepper my own sentences with cuss words, but he took it to a whole nother level. I mean, he didn't say a single sentence without layering on the cuss words. It wasn't even fun anymore, and I got tired of hearing him talk because of it. That, and how Waddles would brag about how rich he was, and this private school in England that he went to when his family lived in Vietnam. Waddles also informed me, after I asked about getting a job in the IT department on campus so I could have some sort of experience that included my major, that the boss would never hire me because I was a girl, and girls just don't understand computers. My dad does computer science for the military, and he taught me about computers originally. We've even built computers together, so that comment about how women can't understand electronics really irked me. Waddles also didn't really care he was taking up 2 lanes on the highway. After the 4th time of me calling it out, I told him to pick a lane and stay with it. At this point, I tuned out his voice and was asking myself why I didn't just drive my own car and meet him at the theatre myself. That being said, if you remember anything from this story, always drive yourself to meet up with a date. Trust me. We didn't really talk about what movie we were going to watch until we got there. Waddles really wanted to see the new 007 movie, the one with Adele singing the intro, but I'm not too big into action and thought we should watch a comedy. Who doesn't love a good laugh? As I wasn't old enough to drink at the time, I thought it would be a good distraction from this already failed date because of everything about Waddles. We stood there debating which movie we were going to see for a few minutes in front of the ticket dude, and I finally gave up telling him I don't like action movies and reluctantly agreed. I remember literally thinking about how much money I had and if I should sneak off and call a cab since I only had cash. Of course, I couldn't just leave Waddles like that. That would be heartless. While we were walking to the movie theatre, he tried to hold my hand. This date had already failed, and I do not like being touched. I don't like it at all. So as I felt his hand brush against mine, I pulled away. He then grabbed my hand, in which I yanked away. Waddles obviously didn't get the hint and put his arm around my waist, which I then pushed him off me. Then Waddles decided to grapple hug me. I do not like being touched, and part of that is because I do have a history of physical abuse. Now I was getting afraid and covered that with aggression. As soon as I saw him lift his arms, I threw my nut between us and pushed him off me as soon as he started bringing me close. I told him not to touch me, and he looked at me and said that I was scaring him. No, Waddles, I told you not to touch me, and basically gave non-verbal cues multiple times in the last 30 seconds. I couldn't say anything because I was so surprised by his audacity. Finally, we get to the movie theater, and I'm really considering just bailing. I didn't want to be rude or raise suspicion, but I didn't want to continue this anymore. I hated talking to him. He doesn't know how to drive, and he couldn't understand the concept of keeping his hands to himself. I just slumped in the chair and braced myself for this movie I didn't want to watch. Then, the magical moment came where he told me he'd be right back. Oh, thank God, I thought. Maybe he was leaving, or it was just the best time for me to bail. Still, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was going to see this thing through because I was a stubborn and stupid 19-year-old. I remember getting physically upset when I saw him coming back, mentally slapping myself for not leaving. However, Waddles had snacks. At least something was going right. At least that's what I thought, before seeing 1 soda cup and 2 straws. I did not want to drink after this weird, creepy-ass man. Plus, I get sick easily, and didn't want to risk it at this point, and refused another drink once he got his sip in. At least Waddles was nice enough to not talk during the movie. It was perfect despite the movie. 30 minutes in, I realized the reason he wasn't talking was because he was snoring. Waddles didn't snore loudly, but loud enough for me to know he was sleeping. I actually began to enjoy the movie. I ate the snacks, refused to touch the drink, and was watching some baddies get their butts kicked. It couldn't get any better than this, and I was honestly, for the first time since the whole date started, enjoying myself. Until Waddles woke up anyway. Insert eye roll and hopeless groan here. I was too hopeful in thinking that he would fall back asleep, and casually mentioned that he seemed tired, and if Waddles would like to stay or if he would like to head out. Again, drive your own car. He said he was tired, and that going home would be a good option. Now, I understand that driving while tired is dangerous, and I had at multiple times counted my money and thought about getting a taxi. It wouldn't have been a problem. I told Waddles I honestly didn't want to go because I was enjoying the movie and would like to stay. Waddles shrugged, brought out his phone, and brought up some illegal movie app, and said, "Don't worry about it. I can just watch the rest of the movie tomorrow at work. Let's go." Awesome. Good for you, but I'm enjoying the movie and don't want to leave. But I left with Waddles, upset over everything that happened, and just not wanting to talk. He learned how to stay inside a lane after I told him to choose one, because at that point, I'd rather leave with a highway patrol. I never deleted a number so quickly, and never reached back out. I didn't look at him at work, but would give short and uninterested answers and responses to him when it came to computer issues at work. We even had a class together for computer hardware, but I dropped that class because of the professor. I still think about finishing that movie every now and again. Two years ago, I matched with this guy on Tinder who seemed like a dream on paper. He was good looking, about my age, just a year older, and extremely financially successful. Had made millions of dollars through a software invention. There were many articles about him online, and he had donated a majority of his money to charity, specifically in sectors I work in and am passionate about. He also donated a ton of computers to students in developing nations. I'm trying to keep it general as to not dox this guy, as he was not a bad person. I was so excited because I'd been out on a lot of first dates with wealthy, soulless guys, or guys without their act together, and I wanted to meet someone more like me, both passionate about helping others and realistic about how they could do it. I have a philanthropic job where I make a decent amount of money doing wonderful work. Again, keeping it general, changed up for some details to avoid doxing. When we met in person, something about him was off. He seemed like he hadn't showered in a few days. He had this large gold chain across his neck, and he even talked a little to himself. The conversation we had was the craziest one I think I've ever had with anybody, ever. And I work with traumatized children who would have been displaced from their homes. He believed in conspiracy theories, in astrology, and even that he had psychic powers. The whole date, he kept telling me about his powers, his luck, and how whenever he wanted someone to work for him, he just imagined them and they would show up in his office. He ate fast food and didn't exercise, but because he was in good shape, believed it was his psychic energy. He also believed Anderson Cooper was a lizard person. After about 2 hours, although it was interesting as hell for me, I left. He messaged me immediately after, asking for a second date. I said no, and he asked me if I wanted to take a $10,000 trip to Paris with him. I said no again. He offered me a $150,000 a year role at his company. I said no. He offered me $400,000. I told him no and wished him well. For about 6 to 8 months after, he would message me about once every 2 months to tell me about tech deals he had closed, the charity work he had done, the pictures of himself in exotic locations. He would ask me for advice about his charity and his life. Finally, he disappeared from my phone, but he sometimes appears in my "you might consider following" lists on Instagram. I blocked him on all of these. What a weird guy. I met a guy from Hinge, and we decided to meet up at a bar on Saturday afternoon. For context, the guy was in his mid-20s, super tall Caucasian. I'm in my early 20s, short Asian American female. If you know the vibes of this already. We both live in a metropolitan city. First impression, he wore a winter coat with sandals, no socks, toenails looked razor sharp. Yellow flag, but whatever. The beginning of the date was okay. He wasn't making eye contact, and I assumed he was shy or nervous. Then it got progressively worse. At one point, he asked me if I watched anime. I said no, because I don't. And he was like, "Why don't you watch anime?" That's the cue to leave, because the convo was starting to get even more embarrassing, and there were people nearby that could hear. He said we could go to another bar, his place, or a park, and I chose the park. He really wanted to go to his place so bad, and kept trying to convince me by saying he has the best view of the city. I was like, I really want to go to the park. He finally agreed, and then he wanted to go back to his place to grab stuff for the park. When we got up to leave the bar, I noticed he was tugging my jacket and lightly nudging me forwards as we were walking out. He paid for the tab. We walked to his place, and he wants to link arms, and we couldn't because of the awkward height difference. He wanted to hold hands instead, so we held hands as he walked to his place. Then, walking up to his place, he kept on trying to walk faster than me and continued to look back to see if I was still following him. We arrived at his place, and it looks like a tornado passed by. He still wanted to stay, but I was like, no, let's go to the park. He randomly hugged me, and then gathers all of the stuff. On our way out, he blurted out, "You should invite me to board game night tonight." After the bar, I said that I have plans with my friends afterwards, and again, I was being way too nice, and I was like, sure. He then kept going back and forth, and he kept saying, "Just kidding, I don't want to impose, but I do want to go, and it was a whole thing. Then we stopped by a 7-Eleven, and on the way, he randomly kissed my hand. Before entering the store, he complained about having to put a mask on. He's complained a couple of times at the bar earlier. Red flag. Upon entering, I opened the door for us, and he loudly said, "That was the weakest door grab," as we walked in. While we were in the 7-Eleven, he was tugging and nudging me around. He asked me if I wanted beer. I said no. I don't drink beer. He proceeded to put beer in the tote bag he brought. He also put a bag of chips in his bag, and I grab a bag of candy, and we head to the register. I put my candy down and get my wallet out, and he only takes out the bag of chips and leaves the beer in his bag. Then this happened. He took out his wallet and was like, "Actually, can you get this? For some reason, I don't have my card with me," even though he just paid at the bar earlier. So I paid, no big deal, because it was just snacks. When we left, I casually mentioned that the beer wasn't paid for, and he was like, "Oh, really? Oh my god." After that mess, we walked over to the park and sat down on the blanket he brought. He takes his sandals off, and then starts rubbing his huge sharp feet on my leg. I told him that I have to go to the restroom and walked away. When I was far away enough, I called my friend Cole in a panic, basically asking him to help save me. Cole said he would be at the park in 20 minutes. When I came back, the date got more weird. Honestly, I should have booked it and ran away, but I'm too nice to ditch this weirdo. The guy started scooting closer to me, looking into my eyes and rubbing my hand. I asked him what was on his mind, and he said, "I want to make out with you." And I told him I don't kiss on the first few dates. Then this guy says, "I have to go to the restroom. You will be here when I come back, won't you?" This has definitely happened to him before. He then kissed my hand again, and my friend Cole shows up at the perfect time. Cole was pretending that he didn't know I was in the park, all like, "Danny, what are you doing here? What are the odds that we're both at the park?" So we kept on having this fake conversation so I can get out of this horrible date. Cole said, "We need to go to Walmart to grab some board games because he forgot to get one." That was a lie, obviously. The guy tags along with us to Walmart. I invited him, my fault, and he's holding a can of beer and drinking it as we're walking. Cole and I basically pretended to buy board games, and then when we all went outside, the guy was like, "Are you sure I can't come tonight?" My friend Cole lied and said that our friends wanted to keep the group small. At the end, he gave my friend Cole and I a group hug, and we parted ways. I blocked his number and unmatched with him. So glad I did not take him to my house. Lesson learned. I've never really celebrated Valentine's Day or been with anyone that made much of an effort for the occasion. Needless to say, the guy I had been dating, keyword had, booked a romantic weekend away for Valentine's Day. I was really looking forward to it. When we got to the hotel, he seemed really disappointed in the room and facilities. We went downstairs to the pool and spa, where he complained that there was no jacuzzi. There was no jacuzzi advertised for the hotel anyway, and demanded we receive a free bottle of wine for the inconvenience. I was so embarrassed, but determined not to let it ruin the night. While we were getting ready to go out, he insists that I need to iron my off-shoulder top, and starts ironing it for me, burning a huge hole in my blouse. I end up having to rip the sleeves off and improvising a sleeveless tube top. We go to a really nice restaurant for dinner, and I can't help but notice that he's throwing the drinks back and considerably more drunk than me. I remember nudging him under the table a few times due to how rude he was being to the staff, who, by the way, were lovely. We end up in a pub, and he's slurring his words and being all over me, and I have the worst gut feeling for no apparent reason. I was so on edge, and just wanted to go back to the hotel. I ended up falling asleep first back at the hotel, and I wake up to him all over me. Disgusting and not reciprocated. I noticed he had ordered bottles of wine from room service and had been up alone drinking them. I'm still half asleep when I hear him mumbling under his breath angrily, making absolutely no sense. He's really annoyed and starts shouting in slurred words at me that I ruined the night and to pack my stuff, we're going home, and that he's leaving, going to get in the car and leave me here. It was early hours of the morning. He storms out of the hotel room after throwing stuff around, but quickly comes back to tell me I was lucky he was drunk or he would be going into town to find a girl prettier than me. I start crying and attempting to calm him down when the fire alarm goes off. I throw on my pajamas and attempt to get him dressed, but he was in such a state I couldn't, and I was panicking. Staff were knocking on the door trying to evacuate the floor. By the time we make it outside, everyone in the hotel is already there. It's raining, and the fire brigade have to give him a foil blanket to keep him warm. It's so obvious I've been crying. I have makeup all down my face. He's too busy verbally abusing the hotel staff and firemen to even notice that people are asking if I'm okay. I'm so beyond embarrassed. Eventually, we get back to the room and he passes out. By the time he wakes up in the morning, I'm showered, packed, both of our stuff, and ready to go. We cut the weekend short despite him wanting to stay another night. On the way home, he won't stop apologizing, saying how awful he feels, and due to not getting much response from me, pulls the car over and refuses to drive until I say I've forgiven him. For the next week, he would leave flowers on my car and even a Moonpig card. Best part, on the drive home, between the groveling, his boss calls and asks him to keep the receipts for the room service so they can be matched up with the hotel room. He had put the entire weekend on his company card and told them he was there for work. I'll make this quick. I just told my work colleagues about a date I had Saturday night, and they were like, "What the hell? You should have called us to come get you." So I've been talking casually and seeing this guy. I'll call him B for butthole. We go out for dinner and go to an arcade afterwards. I drove in, met at B's place, then he drove us into town for food. Dinner was good, and we went out afterwards to an arcade. This is where it starts getting weird. 3 things happened that night that made me feel unsafe and uncomfortable. First thing that happened, he was explaining something to me, and I kept jokingly butting in, guessing the outcome. I know I do this, and I'm working on not doing it. I get excited and try and guess what they will say next. Annoying, I know. He just loses it and starts yelling at me to shut the F up, that it annoys the F out of him, and he doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I get real quiet, and I just sit in his car feeling really weird. We get out of the car, and I'm shaken up a bit. We walk into the shopping center, and I tell him, "Oops, I've got to go back to the car and grab my mask." He then proceeds to say, "How the hell do you forget to grab it? Now we'll have to walk all the way back. I feel like punching you in the head." At this stage, I said, "Calm down, I just got to get it." At this stage, I'm thinking, how do I get out of this situation? My phone is near flat, and my bag is in his car. Looking back, I should have grabbed my bag and legged it. I tell him I have to go to the toilet quickly before playing games, so we find a toilet, and he tells me he'll wait out near the doors, which was a fair way away. And it was busy, so I thought I'd just quickly follow him and let him know not to go anywhere far because I don't have my phone to contact him. He then proceeds to scream through his mask at me, "Go to the toilet, what are you doing?" I'm done by this stage. I'm off him and I want to go. Again, all my stuff is in his car, and I felt I just needed to play nice and get through this evening, even though I was on the verge of crying. By this stage, I'm just really quiet and responding nicely to things B is saying. Nothing else bad happens the rest of the night. I know I can be annoying at times, but I don't feel yelling and swearing at someone is a nice thing to do at all. I told him we don't get along and to not see each other again. He said it made him sad, but accepts it. I ignored red flags a few times early on, thinking people have crappy days, and I give people way too many chances. This time, I've ended it pretty early, and for some good reasons. Be safe out there. I meet a girl on Tinder. We go out twice. She was pretty cool and the dates weren't bad. Even better, she lived a 5-minute walk away from me. Fast forward to the day of date number 3. I realized that I'd much rather stay home and play board games or work on a hobby with my roommates. I want to ditch the date. I'm an average-looking guy with little heft. In short, I'm no stranger to being ghosted. It sucks. I suck it up and decide I'll go on this date with her, buy her a drink, break the news that I'm not as interested as I expected to be, but would like to be friends. I owe her that much as one human being to another. We're at the bar, and we've had 2 drinks and banter, and now I've broken the news to her. She seems to take it as well as anyone could. Then she orders 2 extra gin and tonics for herself. She immediately downs one in a few drags. Then she starts getting really tipsy and very gropey. After removing her hand from my fun zone more than once, I take a distance from her and try to change the subject. After directing the conversation away from uninvited sexual innuendos, she ends up saying she'd like to see my dog. Considering the previous innuendos involved going to my place, I read this as, "Let me use seeing your dog as a means of getting into your place tonight." She takes a few more shots at it, and I deflect with dumb excuses, including, "My room is a mess." I finish my drink slowly as she orders a couple more. My dumbass still wants to be there for her in a way, since I feel bad about ruining her night. Now she's properly drunk. I decide it won't hurt to wrap things up and walk her to her door. She's drunk enough that things could easily go awry for her. Her place is before mine on the walk home, so it won't be too long to endure whatever goes on. To my surprise, she's a little more lucid and giving me a history spiel about some of the buildings on our way. She was impressive with her historical knowledge of the city. I then realize I'm about to turn onto my street, meaning we've passed her place. I tell her I was supposed to be walking her home. She does the drunk giggle and insists, "No, I'm walking you home." After a bit of dumb arguing about who's walking who home, I give in and tell her she can walk with me if she wants, but she's not coming inside. In comparison to my calm and polite demeanor most of the night, I was very firm about her not coming in. We're at my door. Surprise, she needs a pee. I'm now annoyed that she's trying to make me look like an asshole. I remind her that it took only a minute to walk to my door, and this magical urge appearing is bull, and she can walk back to her place. After begging and jumping, the urge to pee magically disappears, and she storms off crying. I go down to join her, and want to offer to still be friends, and make sure she gets home safe. Yeah, I'm a putz. I'm usually not the one doing the rejecting, and I know it can hurt bad. I was trying to be as kind as possible. Anyway, as I walk up apologizing, she shrieks at me to stop following her in a way that's clearly meant to seem as if I'm harassing her on the street near midnight. Fine, screw you, cease and desist. I'm now done feeling bad for her and settling into bed. She's calling. I answer. She apologizes, following up instantly about how she thought it was a scary red flag, how controlling I was to refuse her the use of my bathroom, all because my room is a little untidy. I call BS and make clear that my being overly compassionate is over. I'm pissed at her for calling me, only to veil BS in a pissworth apology. She switches up tone and tries to make her apology now seem sincere. She then follows up with asking if I'd like to come over for us to make up. That's when I hung up. A few minutes later, my phone is buzzing. I figure she's now switched up and blowing my phone up with angry texts. Nope. She was kind enough to send me nudes I'd never asked for over Instagram. Unfollow, block, done. Best part is, summer was coming and she worked for an entertainment company. This company would do business with the hotel where I worked at the time, as tourism season rolled in. Guess who I greeted a few weeks later as they came to drop off their personal pamphlets? A few years ago, I was invited to a birthday party hosted by my cousin's friend. I get to the party and I meet everyone. We're all having so much fun and enjoying ourselves. Everything is good. A few hours after my arrival, a group of guys that only the host knew came along. I meet all of them, we chat, and the party goes on. As I was chilling alone on the couch, one of the guys, let's call him Pete, approaches me and starts flirting with me. He was very charming and interesting, so I reciprocated. For some info, this whole situation takes place in my neighborhood, so everyone lived near me. Weirdly enough, Pete knew my very, very, very toxic ex. We'll call him Tim, but they were just associates. Tim also lives in the same neighborhood. We exchanged Instagrams with Pete, and the next day he texts me. We do a bit of small talk, and he asks if I'm free to grab a drink with him. We arrange it for the next day, and all is well. A little while before he came to pick me up, my cousin informed me that the host of the party had a crush on Pete. We weren't close with the host, we were barely friends, but I felt really bad and wanted to talk about the situation with her before I did anything with him. So when the time came, he picked me up and I explained that due to some reasons that I was unable to talk about with him, I couldn't see him romantically until they were resolved. He was fine with that and pretty respectful about it. We had a very good time. However, he did try to initiate a kiss, but I stopped him, so I guess not so respectful after all. We talked about a lot of things, including sexual experiences, and I mentioned that I was not the biggest fan of one-night stands. So for some reason, while he was dropping me off, he said, "So when are you going to sleep with me? After the 5th date?" Red flags. I just laughed it off and left. A few days go by, and we kind of stopped talking because I still haven't discussed the matter with the host. However, I had been talking for a while with another guy, and I eventually ended up sleeping with him. More days go by, and I talk it out with the host. She tells me that she's fine with me going out with Pete, because that crush was a thing of the past, so I proceed to inform him, and we agree to go out again. We go out, everything is great. We flirt, we kiss, but he turns the subject to sex again, and offers me to go to his place. I agree to go to watch a movie, as long as there's no sex involved, and so it happened. However, while we were watching the movie, something was mentioned about body counts, and when was the last time we had sex. I'm always pretty honest about these things, because I'm not ashamed of it, and so I mention about the guy I was with a few days ago. He gets furious, and after a while, drops me home. Eventually, we stop talking, and out of the blue, I get a phone call from him. He starts asking me all these weird questions about my ex, Tim, so I get the vibe that something is off. He then kind of turns it about himself, and if I would ever go out with him in the future. I'm being very distant with my answers because I'm literally feeling like I'm in a court. After a few more weird questions, my toxic ex, Tim, starts talking. I was expecting it at this point, even though Pete had stated at the beginning he was alone. And they both start bashing me because I slept with the other guy, but I didn't sleep with Pete. I get so mad, but it's so damn funny at the same time, so I just trash talk them and end the call. The last line of the first date was a big red flag, and there shouldn't have been a second date in the first place. Lesson learned. Both have tried contacting me ever since. Never worked. Don't have time for that. I was 24 at the time and had just gotten out of a relationship. I was a single mother, so I only had very small amounts of time I could go on dates and had a hard time meeting guys outside of dating apps due to my work schedule. I was also new to the dating thing, so I didn't really know the proper etiquette for these things. I matched with a guy on Hinge, and we agreed to meet up for coffee at a local Starbucks early in the day before I had to work later. Let's call him Steve. I showed up in casual summer clothes. It was like 80 degrees, and walked in to see my match was about 6'3", wearing dress clothes. I walked up to him and he boasted, "Oh wow, you're actually cute." Thanks. Apparently he didn't anticipate the girl he was meeting up with for a date to be cute. We get in line to order, and I mentioned grabbing something small to eat because I hadn't eaten anything yet. He replied, "Oh, I don't eat breakfast. Eating in the morning makes people fat. You really should look into the science." I rolled my eyes in my own head and intended to end the date early, but after we sat down for our coffee, he did manage to redeem himself a little with conversation. Steve tells me he's dressed up because he worked at a car dealership and was also going to work later. Later I realized it was Sunday and car dealerships only stayed open until like 5 and it was noon, so I think he was lying now looking back. We decided to go for a walk. We walked through the parking lot and he mentions he has a kitten at home that he newly got and he needs to go home and check on him at some point. He asked if I wanted to go meet him. I was extremely hesitant to go, but he assured me that he also lived with family, so it wouldn't be just him, and he swore he'd bring me back to my car for work. So I agreed, and we get in his car and go. We get to the house and walk inside. There's almost nothing in there. The living room has 2 couches, one small TV on an end table, and a bunch of Magic the Gathering cards on the floor. He goes into the kitchen and brings me the kitten to hold, and introduces me to his brother, who's playing video games in the kitchen. Yeah, the kitchen, and has earphones on and has no clue I'm even there. Doesn't even look up. Steve and I go into the living room and sit down and finish our earlier conversations. I sit on one end of the couch, thinking he'll sit on the other so we could talk and look at each other while conversing. Nope. He plops down directly next to me, puts his arm around me, pulls me into him, and starts petting my hair. I got really uncomfortable, as I was really caught off guard. He felt my body language tense up, and he says, "You need to relax. You're on a date and you're so tense." So we just keep talking. I mentioned something about my hormonal condition, and he said, "That makes sense. These are big," and poked my boob. Obviously, I wasn't exactly amused, but I was in a weird spot and didn't feel super safe to get confrontational, so I just asked where the bathroom was so I could have an excuse to create some physical distance. He showed me to the bathroom and I came out. I told him I needed to leave soon, to which Steve replied, "How do you know what time it even is? There are no clocks in here," seemingly amazed that I used my phone. I sat back down on the opposite couch he was sitting on. He got up and moved to sit next to me and held on to me again. He pulled my chin up and leaned in for a kiss. I decided I was going to take one for the team and get out of there. How bad could it be? Well, he opened his mouth so wide, he literally bit my chin. Nope, I was done here. I told him I needed to go home right now. He asked me how long I had, and I said 15 minutes. He asked if I'd like to go upstairs to his bedroom to finish our conversation really quick. I decline. I have to go now. He drives me back to my car, kisses me bye, and texts me later asking to please have another date because we're really connected. I say no thank you and blocked his number. I really hope he never behaves this way on a date again, and I am so grateful to be in a great relationship now and no longer dating. This was on Bumble. I have a lot of horror stories, but this one was actually the worst. So at the time I was single, I had a lot of guys on my Snapchat from Bumble because I wasn't looking too much for a commitment. One day, I get this Snapchat from a guy asking me if I wanted to hang out, and I politely decline because I was out with someone else. He went on a huge tangent about how girls play games and how they don't want a real relationship. Anyway, I ignore him and go on with my day. The next day, I totally forget about the whole experience because it's not uncommon for me to run into guys like that. Anyway, I posted on my story, asking someone if they wanted to just go to the park and relax. The same guy messaged me, but totally forgetting who he was, we ended up meeting at the park. The date went really well, actually. As it got late, I told him I had to leave to do a project for school, and he insisted that we go out for dinner. I declined, but he kept insisting while we were walking back to our cars. Finally, I gave up and told him all right, because it was a free dinner. When I leave, he follows my car to campus and says that he will just wait for me when I'm done. I finish around 8 and we go to Texas Roadhouse. At dinner, he decides to tell me about his divorce and how his ex-wife stole everything from him, how he even served in the military and was deployed to Iraq, got blown up during a siege, and was sent to Germany for rehabilitation for months. He had a handicapped license plate, so I didn't think much of it. He told me how he wasn't supposed to walk, but somehow he was able to walk just fine, and seemed like a totally ordinary guy. It was obvious he had lots of baggage, because of the way he talked about his ex-wife was very hostile. Anyway, the date seemed to go well, until a guy who I went on another date with a few weeks prior stormed into the restaurant drunkenly and apologized for not being good enough for me. Because of all the commotion, me and this guy left and sat in his car and talked. I was young, didn't seem to notice all the red flags at the time. Anyway, we start dating, and near the end of the relationship, my grandfather passed away. I flew from NC to California to attend the funeral. We were dating for about 6 months now at this time. On the day of my grandpa's funeral, I checked Instagram and he blocked me on everything. It was weird, so I did some searching through a friend and saw pictures of him kissing and being with another girl. We obviously break up because he cheated on me, and so I move on. When I get home from California, I was called by police. Turns out, he was a sex offender who abused his 11-year-old niece, and they wanted me to be questioned because he was sleeping with a minor and selling drugs to high schoolers. Turns out, after dating my current boyfriend who works with the police department, that he had charges for physical abuse against his ex-wife, and he had lied about his entire life. I recently met a girl on one of those LGBTQ dating apps, and while her convo through texting was scarce, I know through some experience, some people are just bad texters and open up more in person. She suggested we meet up and go out to a movie. Even though it wasn't a movie she personally was interested in, we decided to go see Spider-Man: No Way Home. She never told me if she had a job or anything, and since I was really excited to meet her in person, I told her I'd pay for our tickets. I showed up early, so we went and bought our tickets and found our seats in the theatre, catching the end of the last showing. Before the movie even started, and on the way over, every attempt I made to make conversation was met with short responses, chit-chat or mumbled responses. I thought maybe I was talking too much, so I wouldn't say anything for a good bit, and she'd get on her phone and start texting, even took a phone call during the previews. I never said anything, and she even asked me if I get on them often myself. Given that's how we met, I told her every so often, but since it's hard finding people who actually want to date or say anything, I told her it's rare I go out with anyone I meet on them, and had deleted mine. During the movie, she would periodically pull out her phone and send texts and scroll through some social media. Once it was over, we walked to my car and she was very distant still, walking like 3 feet away from me, silent with hands in her pockets. Despite everything in me telling me to just take her home, I asked if she was hungry and wanted to get something to eat. She gave me a bar nearby in the downtown area, and we went there and sat down to get some food and drinks. Right after we placed our order, she pulled out her phone once again and was scrolling through Tinder and Tammy, Snapchat, and texting whoever. At that point, I was pretty annoyed. Not only had I driven far out to meet her and pick her up, but I paid for the movie and our food, no question. I proceeded to text my sister to bail me out and got our food to go, dropped her off, apologized about the family emergency, and fought tears the whole 40-minute drive home. I'm female and was 23 at the time. I had been talking to this guy, Morris, that I had met on OkCupid for about 2 years. He was about 26. I live in New York City, and this guy lived at the most 2 hours away in Connecticut, but always made excuses not to come visit. He either never had the money, time, or just had anxiety about the whole thing. I had incredibly low self-esteem at this time in my life, and I ignored every single red flag possible. We would talk on the phone several times a week, but I don't think he knew one thing about me. He would constantly ramble about whatever he was smoking, game he was playing, or record he was listening to. The only time the attention would ever be turned to me, it was for the phone sex. He would say things like he loved me, but I honestly feel like he couldn't even remember how to pronounce my name. So in the fall of 2012, he decided he wanted to go and see Amanda Palmer perform Prince's Purple Rain for New Year's Eve. I love Prince. Of course, since he wanted to go, and I was his love in NYC, we made plans. We each bought separate tickets, and I was getting excited to finally meet this dude. New Year's Eve morning is here. He calls me telling me that his parents are mad at him, that he's going to a concert in the city and not spending time with them. He's 26. The tone he's using with me makes me feel like this is all my fault for pulling him away, and he might get into trouble, but alas, he gets on his train. Now, this is a big concert on New Year's Eve. Where are we going to dinner? What bars are we hitting up to? I have to look nice. I loved dressing up when I was younger, so I had on a shiny dress, high heels, and jewelry. I did my makeup all morning. I head to Grand Central Station and wait. I see my date. He's in a band t-shirt, about 3 sizes too small, and jeans that are way too big. He looks completely disheveled. He barely smiles when he sees me, or even says anything. Where I messed up the most was agreeing to let him stay the night with me in my studio apartment. I guess I figured we'd be out all night having fun, but maybe the chemistry would hit and we'd stay in and have fun. But as soon as we got on the subway to drop his stuff off at my place, I knew neither was going to happen. The whole subway ride, he's deep breathing and shaking like it's the scariest thing in the world. People are looking. Yikes. At my place, he starts crying about how much he hates his life and how he, quote, shouldn't be here. He repeats this sentiment the entire night. I've completely lost my excitement and we haven't left for the show yet. It's dinner time. At least I can enjoy a nice meal for the holiday somewhere. Nope. He insists we use his gift certificate to Subway. He gets a 6-inch ham sandwich and offers to share it with me. I have no clue why I went along with this. I don't even eat ham. I was just already so defeated, I suppose. At the concert, he's complaining how expensive the drinks are. I went to go and get a drink for myself, and I thought about leaving him there and going home. I almost did, but I guess I felt guilty about having his stuff at my house. The show went okay. Not even a peck on the cheek at midnight from the guy that's been having phone sex with me for the last 2 years, but it's whatever. We're back at my apartment by 1 AM, and I'm just gonna go to bed. this couldn't have been more of a bust. I set him up on my couch and I pass out. I wake up around 8 AM New Year's Day to my date sitting in a chair and staring at me. He then tells me he's just been awake all night sitting there in silence. He was watching me sleep. He's crying, and the look in his eyes is extremely unsettling. I honestly feel completely in danger at this point. I walked him as fast as I can to my train station and told him how to figure out how to get home. He texted me sorry about 1,000,000 times about an hour later, and I just straight up blocked him. I didn't hear from him for about 2 years till he messaged me on Facebook how, quote, sexy I looked that night, and that he should have slept with me. He sent me pictures exposing himself, and I blocked him again. I will never know what the hell any of this means. So I matched with a woman the night before Valentine's Day on Hinge, and she agreed to spend some time with me on Valentine's Day. She was out of state for job purposes and was flying into town the next morning on Valentine's Day. So, because it was last minute, I told her we would just be watching movies and I would provide some snackage. She works at a hospital and mentioned she'd have to be at work early the next morning after Valentine's Day. She messages me early morning of the day saying one of the connecting flights she was supposed to take got cancelled due to weather and never said when she would be landing. I just said let me know when she gets into town, and it was around noon when she landed at the airport. We had planned to meet up at around 4 because she lives 45 minutes away and also she had to work in the morning. She didn't get home until 2 PM and was telling me how tired she was. She then said she would take a nap, and I was like, okay, cool, make sure to get some food. She mentioned she thought I would feed her, and I had never agreed to cook in the first place, as it was last minute deal, and with her flight up in the air, she could have gotten back whenever, and never told me when she was supposed to land. She also said she had some errands to run when she got home, and then messaged me shortly afterwards that she did not get any sleep and she was tired. So, with her mentioning how tired she was, I figured she would end up cancelling, as she told me multiple times she was so tired and how she had work in the morning. So she tells me her roommate is ordering food at around 2 PM, and I was like, okay, fine. I didn't hear anything for 2 hours, and inquired what was going on, if she was cancelling or what. Turns out she did not eat any food and blames her roommate for not ordering. I was thinking, you're a grown adult. It's your responsibility to ensure you eat. You're not a child. If your roommate didn't order food, then order food yourself. She ends up coming over, still her choice, then immediately complains about how tired and hungry she was, and that I was to blame for her feeling forced to show up. I'm noticing a lot of blaming other people here. However, I was like, okay, I'll make you some steak. I didn't even know you were coming or not. You kept telling me how tired you were. She said she didn't want steak, and started crying about how stressed out she was. I'm thinking, yo, why did you come here then? You have to work in the morning, you're tired, and haven't eaten. I'm not your parent. You made that choice. I even said, hey, are you cancelling? You told me you were super tired. Am I the arsehole here? I said earlier to grab some food as a reminder. She didn't eat still, and still decides to show up. And because she was hungry, I offered to make her some steak with potatoes, which she refused. I'm so lost here. This was my first Valentine's Day, and because it was a spontaneous meetup, I didn't get food when she told me her connecting flight was cancelled. On top of all the tired messages, I tried to help however I could. She just left after a movie. I was understanding about her having a bad day and gave her the benefit of the doubt and told her to text me when she got home, and she said okay. She didn't text, and I hit her up to see if she was home. She said she was home and said thanks. Then apparently, I did the most awful thing ever on Snapchat according to her. I changed the chat delete settings from deleting after viewing to deleting after 24 hours. After I dealt with her crying and whining about her being stressed out and hungry and tired, mostly all things she could have prevented by not showing up and staying home, her choice as an adult, She messaged me with a snide remark of, "Messing with settings, I see. Weird vibes, but okay." I was like, chats are auto set to delete after viewing. I forget what people say. Then she's like, "No, you have to choose to change it." At that point I was like, yeah, you're just too much. I just met you for goodness sake, and it's just drama. You're literally ticked off by me changing chat settings, so I don't forget what you said. It was nice meeting you, but take care. Then I blocked her. Her freaking out over that was kind of scary. I just dipped out. She was cute, but there was no reasoning with crazy. They will literally ruin your life, and will cause just suffering and stress for no reason.